everybody, welcome back to the Literary Gamers. I'm Matt the Dice Chucker. I've tried filming this video 3 or 4 times now, and we just have a kitty here with cuddle time because it's just what it's going to be. So I hope you don't mind cats and videos. He might get down eventually, but I don't know, I doubt it. Anyway, today we are looking at a bit of a lie of a video. This is a book review, but I'm doing 2 books today. Last week we reviewed Naked Empire, Terry Goodkind's 8th book in the Sword of Truth series, and I said this week we're taking a look at Chainfire. So this week we're actually taking a look first at Dead of Bones. This is a small novella. Oh, are you moving? We're moving. He's right in front of the microphone too. This is a small novella that was published as part of a Legends anthology. And there are quite a few other authors in there from what I know. Stephen King, Robert Jordan, and McCaffrey were all in this big anthology. So this is a nice short little novella, and this is really Sword of Truth 0. This is a little bit of Zed's backstory, and it kind of connects itself to Wizard's First Rule in a few ways. We'll go over that. And then after we're done with this, we're going to talk about Chainfire. This shouldn't take too long because look at the size of it. It's fairly large print, as you can see. So, and also has artwork in here and everything. So I'm not too worried about this taking too long in the video, but I do want to touch on it. Now, I talked about possibly the idea of reviewing these books in publication order. If you can't hear me, the cat is right in front of the microphone. I think I'm going to pick him up again, because that's really what he wants. He wants snuggles. There we go. All right. So this book was actually published a long time ago, but when you see it in the bookstore in the 3-packs that usually come out, this one's usually lumped in with Naked Empire and Pillars of Creation. So this is a prequel with Zed. We start out in Idendril when Zed is a wizard of the First Order still. He's younger. And a woman named Abby comes to him and asks for help. And of course, Zed is of a much different mindset than how we see him in the rest of the Sword of Truth series. And then we have young Zed. He's a bit more arrogant. He's really, everyone keeps fawning over him because he's a wizard of the First Order. He doesn't quite have that wisdom yet that we've seen in Zed's character. And even the people who surround him are basically like, you cannot bother a wizard of the First Order. Basically saying about this woman, Abby, who's come to him for help, that, she's not worth his time. But he eventually does see her. Write it down. There we go. He eventually does end up seeing her, and she asks for help with her family. And this is back during the time of the Rals, when Dahara was considered more of an evil area. Darkenral and Panisral. And at first, Zed doesn't agree to help her, and then she basically shows him some bones, and there's some Dead of Bones. I'm not going to say too much about the book, because if you want to read it, it is quite interesting, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So this was 98, I believe. So Goodkind was still reading, not reading, wow. He was still kind of writing, about this, about Zed and his backstory. And there's a lot of world building in here too, but not a lot. But, like I said, originally it was part of an anthology. I liked Dead of Bones. It kind of set up Zed as someone who could eventually learn humility, especially with the ending. You do find out a major major thing with Zed at the end there, and the boundaries. Back, and we're talking like before Wizards, like way before Wizards First Rule, but it was nice to go back to that mythology for a little bit. One of my pros is Abby is a good character. She is a one-shot character. She may be mentioned, but she's never seen again, as far as the rest of the series goes. And that's okay. I like one-off characters a lot. I think they offer a sense of depth, and then kind of an in-and-out type of thing. You don't have to have characters that last and last. It's okay to have a character that is part of a short little bit and then gone. Now, the con I have is I really thought this was too short. I understand that it was part of an anthology, and I think even Robert Jordan held the copyright to Dead of Bones for a while. Let me check here. Yeah, copyright 1998 and 2001, Robert Jordan. And like I said, because it was part of an anthology, Robert Jordan, Stephen King, Anne McCaffrey, there is another author that's escaping me at this time. But these are all other authors who are writing, especially Jordan and Stephen King, by the inch. As far as I understand, the anthology piece that Robert Jordan put in there was New Spring. And that is a longer, I mean, it's not as long as some of the Wheel of Time books, but it's definitely longer than this. This is quite a short story. I think I read it in an afternoon. It's really a novella, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to Children of Tahara. But I can see this as being more of a short story to that anthology, so I do wish it was longer. I'm sure it could have been longer, and I'm not sure if there was ever any want or need to build further upon this story, which gets into my big thing with this book that I really enjoyed. And this, Dead of Bones and The First Confessor, I will say Terry Goodkind is really good at what I call the art of the prequel. When I'm going to move the camera just a little bit, there we go. You're just seeing the top of my head the whole time. When I wrote Rise of the Black Phoenix years ago, someone had said to me, it would be really cool to see a prequel and see what these characters were doing before that, before the story that I created. And I actually agreed. And I wrote an outline, and I wrote about 3,000 to 5,000 words. And by word 5,000, I reread some of it just to check if it was something that was driving me. And I was bored. And the worst thing you can do as a writer is bore your audience. Now, your first audience is always yourself. So if you're writing something and you read it and you're bored, then your audience is going to be bored. Now, someone can say, well, of course, somebody might find it exciting. That's true, but if I'm sitting there pushing myself through writing this prequel and I'm getting nothing from it, then obviously the majority of my audience isn't going to get anything out of it. And the reason was, I wasn't really telling you anything you didn't know. I couldn't think of anything. My books are dense. Well, at least in the original format, they were dense. They were all cracking 1,000 pages. I think one was like at 998 or something like that. And they had to be formatted to fit down to my 800-page maximum for printing. And these books just had every bit of detail I could have poured into them. So when I went to write the prequel, nothing was new. You got more like in-depth dialogue, but you never got anything that was new. Which brings me to Dead of Bones. Dead of Bones gave me so much new stuff to learn about Zed and to learn about the world as well that I really appreciated this. It's the same thing that happens in The First Confessor. Now, of course, I had hoped that Goodkind would, expand upon the First Confessor timeline, and I really thought he was going to. But nothing ever happened, and now Mr. Goodkind has passed away. But what I'm talking about with the art of the prequel is when you look at TV, movies, and books, when there's a prequel, the worst prequels are the ones that tell you nothing new. As much as the Star Wars prequels have gained popularity due to shows like the Clone Wars and even to some extent Rebels, some people still have massive problems with the prequels and how they were executed. The dialogue is wooden in the prequels. The effects look too fake and all that. And that's true. And really, when you get down to it, the Star Wars prequels spent 3 films showing you the decline of Darth Vader. Some have said, you take that line from A New Hope that Kenobi says where it's, what was it? Basically, the history of Darth Vader. Very, very simple. And turn that into 3 movies. And the films really never told us anything incredibly new as far as, the Star Wars story goes. And that's how it's been criticized over the years. Yes, there's new details and all that, but really, we're spending 3 movies watching Anakin, who was a Jedi, basically turned into a Dark Lord of the Sith. Stuff we knew it was going to happen already. Now, the Star Wars prequels are better than what I consider the Lord of the Rings prequels and The Hobbit, which the Hobbit prequels spent too much time ensuring that you remembered that you were in Middle-earth. And what I mean by that is so many points of those films were reminding you of how great Lord of the Rings was. The first Hobbit film was enjoyable, the second one was a tad better, and the third was just basically an entire visual effects piece, and all of which told us nothing new. Even if you had never read the Hobbit books before, you had some semblance of the trip with the dwarves and the ring and all that. So we're spending 3+ hours on most of those movies watching something we know is already going to happen. And of course you have the extended action sequences and all that. A TV show that really shines as the art of the prequel is the second season of Spartacus on Starz, which goes back and shows you the growth of the gladiator school, and kind of giving you a backstory, because there's going to be someone who's going to come into play that is very important later on. And that's what I'm talking about with the art of the prequel. That's really nice here. While Dead of Bones doesn't entirely do that, where it tells you something of importance for a later book in the series, The First Confessor does, and there'll be a full video about The First Confessor. But I've rambled way too long about this tiny novella. Just know that I really do appreciate this little prequel. It takes, like I said, an afternoon to read, and I think that people will really enjoy it. Plus, after reading something like Naked Empire, this is a great return to form. We're back to fantasy. We're not so much infusing politics into this. Now, like I said last week, it's not bad to put politics into your stuff. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is I got exhausted by the amount of politics in Naked Empire. I mean, there's the 100 to 150 page rally that went on. We don't have that in Dead of Bones, and neither do we have it in Chainfire. This is the 9th book in Terry Goodkind's Sword of Truth series. As with all the other series in this book review cycle, I talk about the wizard rule, and in this one, the wizard's 9th rule is contradiction cannot exist in reality, and we'll talk about why that is right now. The plot of Chainfire is, in the immediate aftermath of a battle, Richard wakes up, and he's looking for Kaelin, and he's asking everyone where Kaelin is. Nobody knows who he's talking about. Anyone who had any memory of who Kaelin could be cannot remember her. The only person who remembers her is Zed, but there's a caveat to that, and we'll get to it. So, Richard is the only one who seems to remember her. He's the only one who believes himself. And as the story goes on, he becomes so strong in his convictions that she exists that he's able to convince many other people that she existed as well. Now, whether or not they're humoring Richard, just telling him, yes, of course, she existed, or not, is up to them. Chainfire is about a spell that was invoked by a few people who have captured Kaelin. And basically, anyone who's not in direct contact with Kaelin would, or has some sort of magical immunity, would forget who she is. Richard is immune to this because of the magic of the Sword of Truth. I really liked that idea, that because he was holding the sword at the time the spell was invoked, he remembers her. Because it's been a long time since we've had, sword magic. I think Temple of the Winds maybe was the last time we had true sword magic. The sword was in the other books, yes, but I think that was the last time we really saw it in a magical action. And there was a few references in Faith of the Fallen, but overall, sword magic. It was nice to get back to that. And we're back to fantasy. There are little bits of political talk here and there, but that's all they are, is little bits, and they serve a point to the story, which is a positive here. Now, I talk about Zed knowing who Kaelin is. Let me expand upon that. Zed knows who she is because he knows who the Mother Confessor is, and they lead Richard. They're in Idengel, and they lead Richard to a grave for Kaelin. And you're given this little bit of hope as the reader. Wait, Zed knows who she is, and then come to find out it's because she, because she has passed away. He still doesn't give up hope. He does become broken after a while, Richard. At this time, when he needs to be a leader for people, he becomes a broken man because he believes, the love of his life, part of his soul, is gone. Now, there is one thing mentioned, and I was really hoping Terry Goodkind would go for it. And I'll talk more about the mindset I had reading this book in just a second. And it is possible that, you know, even Nikki, who you finally get to see Nikki really in this one, and you have Kara, and they all want to believe that Richard knows about this person. But there's this idea that it is possible that Kalen has been just a creation of his own imagination. Like I said, this is the first time we really see Nikki as an ally. I liked that. She quickly becomes my favorite character in the series. So what really is interesting is this book was published in 2005. Back in the day, when I was first reading fantasy, there were so many fantasy series that I wanted to read that I would often say, unless your series is done, I don't want to read it. Because I want to sit down and basically pour myself into every bit of fantasy you can offer me. But with Sword of Truth, I knew there were the 11 main books of Sword of Truth, and you had the Richard and Kaelin series. Her name was even in this series. And then, of course, you have more and more come out as Terry continued to grow this world. So I knew that Kaelin existed. So I, after figuring out what the premise was of this book, had to slow myself down. I needed to take a step back, and I said, I want to throw myself into 2005. The series is not done. There's a few books left coming. I, as a reader, have to question myself now. I've been through 8 books, 9 if you count Dead of Bones. And for some reason, I have to wonder, is Kaelin basically just a figment of Richard's imagination? And I love this cover because it's like she's disappearing from everyone's mind. Wouldn't that have been something if we're in book 9 and Terry Goodkind says, just a heads up, she never existed? That would have thrown me through a loop. But of course, I mean, the two are soulmates, so they're definitely going to be together by the end. I really wanted to believe that the author would do something like that. I don't know if I'm just thinking too fantastically, but I really thought that would have been something. And of course, I'm not going to tell you the whole story in case you want to read, and I don't want to give you any spoilers. But I will give you some pros. We're back to fantasy. We are now, I want to say, kind of out of the woods with some of the non-fantastical stuff. And I do mean the political ramblings. Once again, I have no problem if you want to put politics in your story. And you know, when I wrote the second book in my series, when it was originally called Casket of the Carpenter, I told the people who read it, just be prepared, because this one has to deal more with politics because the world is expanding. I've got to tell you how everyone kind of lives their lives and how the social structures work and how that ties into every kingdom's political structure. But, you know, Pillars of Creation and Naked Empire were really kind of, you know, pushing my limits as a reader for some of the stuff that he was saying. Basically, the never-ending speeches, the overt anti-communism stuff, and you're, you know, more than welcome to have those beliefs as an author, but you eventually have to get back to the plot. And both Pillars of Creation and Naked Empire struggled with that. Soul of the Fire and Faith of the Fallen, they had it as well, but the nice thing about those was that it had something to do with the plot. Naked Empire especially felt like I'm giving you this 150-page rewind and spewing of personal beliefs just to remind you where we are. It's kind of like, you know, when you have the TV show that does the montage episode towards the middle of a season when it knows it's not getting picked back up. Something else that Legend of the Seeker did. They had a montage episode by the end of the first season because I don't know if they thought they were getting picked up for a second. I say that, by the way, Legend of the Seeker is the TV show adaptation of Wizard's First Rule, just in case you weren't aware. It is not an easy show to find. It used to be on Hulu. It is gone now. So my biggest recommendation for people who want to see it, I think you can get it on ABC if you have that app, because, you know, they never stop with the streaming apps. Or I found used copies of the DVDs at a game store, a video game store that carried DVDs. So I found them there for a decent price. Anyway, so that's my pro. We're back to fantasy. Let me get back to the review of the actual book. Back to fantasy. 2, this is a severely human book. The amount of emotions that are moving through these pages, and by the way, we're back to more of a standard typeface. I know I bring that up a lot, but it's important to me that the books kind of keep their profile as time goes on. When you give me a book that's huge and then the print face shifted, well then I'm not sure if you're printing this, you know, as the editor making that decision just so they could charge more, or did you really format it like that? But anyway, that's a side thing. This is a severely human book. You're basically moving through a character's trauma. I really liked that. Goodkind has often been noted as saying that he doesn't write fantasy. He writes human stories set in a fantasy setting, which, I mean, I think that's fantasy. And that's the definition of fantasy. At least modern fantasy as we know it. To see him struggle, to see him try to explain himself, it's almost a little bit like like reading someone who's being gaslighted, but for the pure fact that you know that this person does exist. And I feel terrible using that example, but it really did feel when I read this book like Richard was being gaslighted. And of course, at the end, we know that that's not true. That Kaylin is alive, but she's gone for the moment, and we'll touch upon that next week. Once again, love that Sister Nikki number 3 pro is well, not Sister Nikki, but she's Nikki, and she's an ally, and you really kind of get to see what she can bring to the table. Just seeing how, and I mean, the other thing too that was so interesting to me is everyone is pushing Richard to be this leader. You know, they need him. The Emperor is invading, and he is stuck on Kaylin is alive, and they need him to not be stuck on that emotion and be a leader. And I mean, like I said, he becomes so broken, and it was, I hate to say it was nice to see that, but because he had become almost deified in the previous 8 books, it was just nice to see this side of him. And I thought that was really kind of excellent in a way for Goodkind to show flaws in his characters, because we were getting a little out of control with that here. I looked at my review from way back when, and I don't think my review changes for this. This gets 4.5 stars from me. I thought this was excellent. And you can say, Matt, does this have to do with the previous book in the series and your opinion of that book to this one? Partially. It always does. I mean, when you read any series of books, some people will say, I didn't like the second Harry Potter book because the third one was so good. Okay. Yeah, you like the third one better because the third one engaged with you more. Okay, that's a thing. When I look at this as part of the series as a whole, that doesn't change. This is still 4.5 stars. I've read the whole series. And I think this book really is a linchpin to the whole thing. Now, as a side note, once again, you've heard me say it before. If you're this far, you might as well keep going. When I do my research for these things, I tend to go to Goodreads. I don't go to Amazon because a lot of times they'll talk about how the product looks, and that's not a reflection on the content of the story, so be it. Anyway, one of the things I noticed with Goodreads, which was almost on the verge of hilarity, was someone said, you know, I had my doubts about this series, and this book really clinched the doubt that this was not a good series. Really? You're on book 9. How do you hate a series of books so much that you push through 9 books and finally decide, okay, I'm done? Especially when that review is dated way back to when it was still only 11 books. You are on book 9 of 11 and you're deciding now to quit. It's like you're waiting until the end of a movie and you hear that final line and you say, oh, I just walked out after that line was done. Of course you walked out. It was the end of the movie. That's basically how I'm seeing some of these reviews. This was the book that said to me I don't want to finish. I mean, you're halfway through. You're more than halfway through if you were reviewing this back when it was only 11 books. So, anyway, I do find looking at some of these reviews interesting. Once again, if you want true, honest reviews of of the Sword of Truth books, look at your 3-star reviews from Goodreads, because they're not panning a book and they're not overtly praising a book. We're living in an age of 5-star, 1-star. So anybody in this day and age who's giving any of these books 3 stars are going to give you honest feedback, story notes, and all that. So please take a look at that. Chainfire, 4.5 stars from me, and this is upon a reflection of the whole series. I think it is excellent, a great return to form for Goodkind as far as getting back to basics with his non-political fantasy, and a lot of that world building from this spell itself, the Chainfire spell itself, was kind of rewarding to read. Next week, we're taking a look at Phantom. That is the 10th book in the series, and that's the middle of this Chainfire series of books, which ends with Confessor. Now, when we get to Confessor, I will review it as the original ending to Sword of Truth, and as the continuation of a story and the end of just that for now. Because remember, these all have their little clumps in these series. Remember, we had the Dark and Raw clump was books 1 and 2, 3 through 6 were the Imperial Order, the cat's back. 7 and 8 were pristinely ungifted. I don't think Dead of Bones ranks anywhere in this. Probably goes with the Dark and Raw series. Then you have Chainfire, which is 9 through 11, 12 through 15. With the other prequel is the Richard and Kaelin series. Then you have Children of Dahara, which were the series of 4 novellas and 1 novel. And then you have Nikki Chronicles, Nikki Sister of Darkness, which with both Children of Dahara and Sister of Darkness, I will be reviewing those for the first time. So thank you all for joining me. Look for the review next week of Phantom, and we're going to keep moving forward with Sword of Truth. Thank you all for tuning in. And if you liked what you see here, go ahead and consider subscribing. And we're trying to get to 750 by the end of May. I think that is entirely possible. If you didn't like what you see, and you're watching the 9th video of this book review series, I have the same question for you as I do for the people who are reviewing the 9th book on Goodreads, saying, I can't believe that this book cinched it for me that I hate this series. If you've been watching this long, I assume you like this series, or at least want to hear the thoughts about it. Thank you for joining me. See you next time, everybody. I got nothing else to say.